Hello and welcome to this FPJ interview with John Shropshire, the former Group CEO of G's Fresh and their current chairman. John has been at the heart of a recent independent review into labour shortages in the food supply chain, which has made 10 recommendations to help the industry tackle issues related to the recruitment and retention of workforce in the industry. It is an issue which is of huge importance to the trade, and it has been welcomed by both the NFU and DEFRA, and John is here with me today to discuss some of the finer details. So thanks for joining us, John.
Pleasure.
I would like to start by asking you quite broadly what you think are the most pressing challenges facing the UK fruit and vegetable sector when it comes to labour. What are the areas that we really need to focus on, do you think?
Well, fruit and vegetables in particular, we need to have more continuity in the seasonal worker scheme so that we know that we're asking for 5 years. It needs to be at least 5 years, to be quite honest. If we're going to continue to invest in the industry, we've got to know that there's some, access to staff over that time. So that's the really most urgent thing. I think the other one is the image of the industry, and we've got to try and work immediately at trying to improve the image. And one of the big concerns we have is the exploitation and welfare issues of some of the people that have come in on that scheme. So, that is something we should be working on immediately as well.
And related to that second point about the exploitation of workers, that was a major issue last season, with some fairly last minute sourcing of seasonal workers from new countries that we haven't taken workers from in the past. How do you think we can avoid a similar situation playing out this season when it comes to having greater oversight and control over that recruitment process and avoiding some of the pitfalls in the recruitment and potential exploitation of workers?
Well, I think there is a role for government here, because I think that it's difficult for the industry to self-regulate when it's made up of a lot of smaller businesses in particular, and might not even have an HR team. Mm-hmm. So I think that the government needs to have stronger regulation. It's not very often I ask for stronger regulation, but I think we do need stronger regulation, and we need stronger enforcement. The GLAA, I assume, would be the body that the government would use to actually enforce the rules, but they're completely underfunded. I think they only audited 1% of agency labour providers last year. It's a ridiculously low number. So there needs to be more funding for that. And there needs to be, to an extent, a situation where the producer pays. The producers, I think farmers have got to be prepared to pay for some of this as well. Mm-hmm. And so that we have a really professional, properly set up system. We actually have done a lot of research worldwide to see how other countries do it. And we know for a fact that other countries manage this better than us. Mm-hmm. I think the exemplars are actually New Zealand and Australia. If we had a schemes as good as theirs, then we would have something we could be really proud of.
And kind of focusing more on labour shortages. I mean, for the past, for this season and next, we have a guarantee of 45,000 seasonal workers under the current scheme. It seems to be widely accepted that that is just about enough to cover the UK's requirements. But I noticed that in the review, you called for the government to consider lifting the cap on the number of visas that are issued. Do you think that that is a likely prospect? And do you think, and in what ways would that benefit the industry, do you think?
We need the amount of workers we need. We need So
Yeah.
one thing we need to do is have a more accurate way of analysing what we do need. And that's a bit hit and miss at the moment.
Okay.
So I think one of the things we recommend is that more data and more understanding of what we really need is really important. And then the government's got to provide what we need. I think that what isn't well understood politically is that this isn't actually immigration. It's nothing to do with immigration. There's a lot of rhetoric. I mean, they use this word fruit pickers, and it's used sort of excites. The media seems to get incredibly excited by this term fruit pickers. And they're basically, need to get the focus back onto the fact that it isn't immigration. The people come in on a visa, they go in and out of the same year. It doesn't impact on housing or the NHS or social services because the young fit people coming in, they don't bring families, and it's an absolute no-brainer, really. The tax take is enormous out of these people. They pay an enormous amount of tax in the UK. They spend quite a bit of money in the UK, and they are responsible for probably, I don't know, I think the exact number is £3.5 billion worth of fresh produce harvesting, which is a balance and payments issue, isn't it, as well?
Of course, encouraging the next generation of talent into the industry is another part of the jigsaw, maybe not so much related to our seasonal worker requirements, but in terms of labour provision more generally. Do you think that the UK's approach needs to change? I mean, a lot has been made of the need to open people's eyes to the diverse range of opportunities that exist in the sector. But it seems that so far there hasn't been enough progress made in that area. Do you think that we need to think differently about how we can attract the next generation of talent into the fruit and vegetable sector?
Definitely, that's one of our recommendations, and that's quite a bit of work because it's going to be a long-term project. But we actually recommend that it's taken forward by the Food and Drink Sector Council, supported by organisations like the IGD and TIA, which is the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture. I think the IGD is already working in schools. I think 15,000 school children are actually feeding into that program annually that they're running. So I think we've got a pilot project there that could be rolled out across the country. I think we need to also look at what other countries do in terms of particularly Ireland and Holland, where they're organising. We've got Board Buyer in Ireland and the Green Pact in Holland, where they're emphasising the environmental opportunities for the industry, how we're going into a new revolution in terms of sustainability, the environment, net zero, all these sort of things, new technology coming on, and emphasizing back into schools how exciting this industry is going to be in the future. And they've been actually already successful in that. So I think we've got a model there that we can follow in this country.
And just touching on a point that you made just there about how exciting the industry could be in the future and about some of the technological advances that are happening. When it comes to labour provision, it seems to be generally accepted now that automation in harvesting and some other really important on-farm jobs is still quite a long way off. And do you think that there's a danger that we focus too much on the need for automation as a replacement for labour and forget that actually we have a real pressing requirement for workers on farms right now? I mean, do you think that is being fully recognised by government, or is there still a tendency to try and pass the buck by putting the emphasis on the need for automation?
I think it's understood in DEFRA. I think other parts of the government don't actually understand it at all. I think that either the technology isn't available, or if it is available, there is new technology coming on all the time, but actually the lead time now up to 2 years to buy machinery, new machinery anyway.
Yeah.
And it's getting prohibitively expensive, so the price keeps going up. So the alternative really for a lot of companies is to actually import and go abroad. So a lot of businesses in this sector actually have farms. One soft fruit grower, they've got farming operations in Portugal and Morocco, and they said to me, well, look, we are moving already production to those countries, and we could move a lot more if we haven't got the people. The mechanization opportunities are just not there yet. They're going to come, but they're not going to come in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to take years.
Yeah.
I think, so there are other alternatives. As I'm trying to emphasize to government, we still have a free trade agreement with Europe. Europe is a brutally competitive single market, has a brutally competitive single market that actually, a lot of companies would be better off just importing rather than fighting this continuous battle in the UK to actually be supplied with enough labour and trying to convince the government every year. They don't exactly encourage investment. So that's what we need, is that encouragement through a long-term arrangement, and then start to invest in our own country rather than think about imports.
And on that point, I mean, DEFRA, it seems that DEFRA is starting to listen to the needs of the UK fresh produce industry more closely. There was the recent number 10 food summit where Rishi Sunak met Minette Batters and listened to some of the pressing concerns of the industry. They've also, DEFRA has also reiterated, I think, a previously made but fairly loose commitment to 60% self-sufficiency in food production. Do you get the sense that they are willing to respond to your recommendations? Is there a sense that they are actually going to take action on some of these things?
I think they're going to have to if they're going to meet the 60%. So if the 60% means anything, they're going to need to. Because I don't think the 60% will be delivered. And I think DEFRA are behind that view. They agree with that view, I think, although we're going to be waiting 3 months for DEFRA to come back to us with their response to the report. But the Prime Minister has given a strategic plan based on 60%, and we need to get, the whole of the government needs to get behind that if it means anything.
Yeah. I mean, you've made 10 recommendations. We talked about some of them here. If you could only request one big change from the government, which one would it be? Which is the most important, do you think?
Well, you're coming at it from the fruit and veg industry, aren't you? So
yeah.
I'm going to stick with that, because although we are representing the entire food industry, so we're not, the meat industry has been a big part of this whole review.
Sure. Okay. But with your fruit and veg hat on. Well,
with the fruit and veg hats, we need more longevity to the seasonal worker scheme. We need to actually have the right number, which needs working out each year, not this arbitrary number off the top of somebody's head. And we've got to have better regulation and enforcement, because we need a scheme that we can all be proud of, and there's no exploitation in it.
One of the issues raised by the Association of Labour Providers, David Camp, their CEO, he was an interviewee at Festival of Fresh recently. He said that there is room for improvement in some of the labour conditions on UK farms. I know that a lot of major fresh produce growers in the UK do a brilliant job in that respect, but there is there is room for improvement in terms of accommodation, and there are still issues regarding some of the treatment of workers, and being sensitive to some of the cultural differences between workers. In the fruit and vegetable industry specifically, where do you think there is room for improvement there, based on your knowledge and experience of the industry?
I think as part of this whole process, the government should actually do this by license, so you don't get people on your farm on this scheme if you don't meet certain standards.
Yeah.
And those standards include the place they have to live, and other benefits like, access to shopping or mosques or churches or whatever. So talking about the different cultures. But also I think that the farmers and growers that are in managers, who are in supervisors, are employing these, they ought to meet a certain standard of training. So I think there should be training courses that they have to attend to actually be able to actually employ these people. And I think that is something that's relatively straightforward to do. We can't, we have basis, we can't go out spraying without the qualifications. So why should we be employing seasonal workers without the right qualifications? I think that it's fairly straightforward, really. Could be easily done. And I think the government has a role in actually, enforcing that and making that happen.
And just finally, how confident, seasonal labour has been the pressing issue in the fruit and vegetable sector for many years, maybe for the past decade. It's been right at the top of the agenda for growers, and it's something that's been a real challenge. How confident are you that we can kind of start moving past that and have sufficient and high quality provision of labour without so many difficulties and question marks about where it's coming from and how well it's provided for in terms of the welfare of those workers?
I'm more confident than I was, because we've got a Prime Minister now that's actually shown a commitment to the industry. So I think he believes. It's a pity we can't get more ministers onto farms and get them to understand, and more politicians. I think they've got to understand that we're in a competitive space with Europe, some very efficient operations out there. And I think, but I am more confident, definitely am, because of that state. That number 10, I was at number 10, and I was quite buoyed up really by, what he said and the way he said it. I thought it was genuine.
Okay, so and then the timeline from now, we'll get a response from government in 3 months' time, you said. When can we expect to start seeing some of those changes being implemented, do you think? Well,
we've asked for the commitment on the seasonal workers scheme by the end of the calendar year. So the response is due out in October, and hopefully we can get some commitment.
Okay, well, fingers crossed. Thanks for talking to us, John.
Pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.